Hi, everybody. This is part two of our first module. This is the, third video. In this video today, we're going to talk about slopes of lines and equations of lines. So let's get cracking. And I'm going to share this. And this is a continuation of the handout that we talked about with equations. And let me scroll up a little bit here. Whoops. And so the first thing I want to talk about is when I talk about the slope of a line, how the slope of a line talks about the steepness of the line, for one thing. It talks about other things as well. Okay, the slope of the line can be thought of as the rise over the run, the change in y over x. It can be talked about as an average rate of change over time. Just remember the numerator is a change in the y's, and the denominator is a change in the axis. Okay, so when we apply the slope formula, in the slope formula, basically we pick a y from one of the ordered pairs that we have. We need two ordered pairs. Use a formula. So we can start with a -2 or we can start with a 6. Either way, we come up with the same answer. So if I start with a -2, I get -2 minus 6 from the formula, y2 minus y1. That gives us -8. And in the bottom, this is where it counts. Okay, if I start with the -2 up here, I have to start with what it's grouped up with in the ordered pair, which would be the 3. If I started with the 6 up here, I would have to start with the -5 down here. Okay, so that means we have 3 negative, a -5, subtract a -5, because remember that subtraction just doesn't go away because it's a negative number. That gives us -8 over 8, or -1. Always reduce the slope if you can. If it can be reduced, reduce it. So if we want to find the slope between -2 and -3, and the point -7 minus +4. I'll start with the -3. I have -3 minus a -4 over -2 minus a -7, and that ends up giving us 1/5. And you can see this one as well. If the y value does not change, we have a horizontal line. Remember, horizontal line is straight across, and that means that the slope is 0. There's no steepness. If the x value doesn't change, that means we have an undefined slope. There's going to be a 0 in the denominator, because we take same thing minus same thing in the denominator, we get 0. That's an undefined fraction. And that's a vertical line. That's straight up and down. Okay. Some meanings of the slope. One meaning of a slope. If the slope is, say, 3 over 4, that means we can go 4 units right and 3 units up. So we can start at any point on a line and apply the slope and get another point. So if I start at a point, say 2, 3, I could go 4 units right. So if I started at 2, 4 units right would get me to 6, and then 3 up. Okay. If I started at 3, I would end up at 6. So that would be a new point, and I could connect the line and extend it. Just like a -3 over 2 slope means we go 2 units right and 3 down because it's negative. Okay. You can attempt to graph with a slope and a line. I'm sorry, with a slope and a point. I'll give you a couple of examples there. We can determine the slope of an equation by getting it into this form, y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope. This is known as the slope-intercept form of an equation. Okay. The slope-intercept form, m gives you the slope, and b gives you the y-intercept, the place where the graph crosses the y-axis. Okay. So here's some examples. So we have y equals -2/3 x plus 5. Okay, that's already in that form. Y is isolated, so the slope is -2 over 3. Sometimes an equation is not in that form, and we have to get it in that form in order to determine the slope. So we have to isolate the y. So in this case, we would subtract the 3x and get -4y equals 3x plus 12. Then we would divide each part of the equation by -4. So that gives us -3 over -4x plus 12 over -4. And that ends up giving us then 3 over 4 because a negative over negative is positive. And then 12 over minus 4 reduces to be minus 3. So the slope here is 3/4. If two lines have the same slope, they're parallel. If two lines have a slope such that they have opposite signs and are reciprocals, then they're perpendicular. Just some things to keep in mind. We can also graph with x and y intercepts. I give you a link here. You should probably take a look at that as you go through. And slope m, if we have an equation of a line, so here we're after an equation. We're not going to solve for a variable, we're solving for an equation. We might solve for a variable on the way to get that. But the point is we want an equation. Our answer is an equation of y equals mx plus b. Okay? So the slope m, the y-intercept b is given. Using the slope-intercept form of y equals mx plus b, we just substitute the values in. So if we have the ordered pair 0b, then that's the y-coordinate would be the y-intercept. So for example, if we're given a slope of minus 3 and a point 0 minus 5, we just plug the minus 3 in for the slope, and we plug the minus 5 in here, and we're done. That's the best of all worlds. That's the most straightforward case. Case 2, we have the slope and 1 point. So this one's a little bit more tricky. Not super tricky, but a little bit more. Okay. So if we're given a slope and we're given a point, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with this. Okay. So we'll plug the point in to x and y, and then we're going to solve for b. That's the process that we use. So in other words, since m is 6 in this example, and the point is minus 2, 8, I plug 6 in for m, minus 2 in for x, and 8 in for y. And then 6 times minus 2 is minus 12, plus b equals the 8. I'll add 12 to both sides and get b equals 20. So then in the end, I put that all together, and I would circle that up as my answer, that y equals 6x plus 20. Now, sometimes the slope is not given to you quite as explicitly. Okay? In other words, we might have a point and a line, and we're asked to find the equation of a line parallel to the line we have, or perpendicular to the line we have. Okay? I suggest that you start out by looking at this link here. Okay, this is a video that tells you how, explains this more. But I do work out a few examples here. Okay, it's a variation of the method where the slope is not explicitly, as I said, stated, but given to you indirectly. So for example, my line passes through the point A4 and is parallel to the line y equals 2x plus 5. What's my line? Okay. So the slope for this line, since y is isolated, is 2. So since our line is parallel to that given line, we're going to use that slope of 2 as well. Okay. So going back to what we did above, we put the slope in for x, or m, I'm sorry. We put 8 in this case for x because the x is 8. We put minus 4 in for y because the y is minus 4. And then plus the b here, and we're going to solve for b. So 12 times 8 is 16. Subtract 16 from both sides, and we get minus 20 for b. Okay, so that's part of our solution. That's not the only thing. So then we put it all together as an equation. So that means y equals 2x minus 20. Why is the slope equal to 2 in this problem? Because they're parallel. Let's look at the perpendicular case. So my line is 8 minus 4 and is perpendicular to the line whose equation is y equals 2x plus 5. So remember, a perpendicular line is opposite signs. So since the 2 is positive here, we're going to have a slope that's negative because it's perpendicular. And it's going to be the reciprocal of 2, which would be 1 over 2. And so my equation so far looks like the y equals minus 1/2 x plus b. Now I'm going to plug just like up here And just like the problem before, the point in, I plug 8 in for x and minus 4 in for y. Now 1/2 times 8 would be 8 over 2. It'd be a negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So we'll add 4 to both sides. And when we add 4 to both sides, we get y should be b here. Sorry about that. Change that. Should be b equals 0. And so we end up with the equation y equals minus 1/2 x. Now, sometimes we have 2 points. This is an important scenario where we have 2 points. We need to find the slope using the formula. So when you're given 2 points, the first thing you do is you use the formula to find the slope. And that slope formula, if you remember, is a change in y over the change in x. And so then after that, we plug one of the points into this form along with the slope and solve for b, just like we did before. And so let's take a look at an example. So suppose we have the points 4, 1 and 8, 2 on our line. So then I'm going to take my difference in y's. I start with a 2 in this case. 2 minus 1 gives me 1. If I start with the 2 up here, I have to start with the x it's grouped up with down here, which is the 8. So 8 minus 4 gives me 4. So I end up with a slope of 1/4. Now we'll substitute 1/4 into the formula. Okay. So we have 1/4 for the slope. Since this is a fraction, I'll make the x a fraction. I'm going to take the 4 and make it 4 over 1 equals the y value for that x, which was 1. And then 1/4 times 4 over 1 gives me 1. Okay. 1 plus b. And on this side I have 1. I'll subtract 1 from both sides and get 0 again. So that means we get the equation y equals 1/4 x plus 0, or just y equals 1/4 x. A few special cases. Our first special case is when this slope is 0. That means the y values don't change. It's a horizontal line. How do we get the equation for that? This is just something you have to memorize in your think space. Okay. Whatever the y value is, that's our equation. So y equals 3, since this point here has a y value of 3. So that's our answer. If we have undefined slope, remember the undefined slope is a vertical line. X doesn't change. And so we take the x value and set it equal to the x value that's in the ordered pair. So since x is 6 here, our equation, our answer would be x equals 6. Okay. That should do it with equations of lines. I hope this helps you. Have a good day.